everybody. Welcome to the Improv Summit. This is Spencer, and I have with me today Nathan from across the pond. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. Yes, yes.
Welcome, welcome. Where are you joining us from?
I'm in Canterbury, Kent, UK.
Is that near London? I have no idea where anything in the
That
UK
is
is.
pretty near London. Yes, I haven't seen London in quite some time though.
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of stuff going on. Well, thanks for joining us. Just
Yeah.
before we dive in, just give me an idea of your like improv background. Like, do you teach? Do you coach? Do you perform? Just a general improv background.
Okay. Generally, I do everything. So I direct, I teach, I perform. I've been teaching improv since 2006, so nearly 15 years. Is that? That's probably about right.
Yeah.
So I've been doing it for quite some time, for the length of time I've been alive, anyway. Um, yes, so I do all the activities for a while. I enjoy improv within the little box of improv comedy, but I also when I was 5 years old, I wanted to become an actor, so I like the whole theatre world of improvisation as well. I'm sure I'll get into that more and more as we go through.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and of course, one thing we'll talk about later is how you can use improv in your daily life. Like, even if you don't want to be an actor, what benefits improv has. And as someone who lacked a lot of confidence from people that I had in my past who were not the most what's the word, like, encouraging, it kind of really threw down my confidence a lot, and so improv is where I started to gain it again. So we'll
Mm.
talk about that as we go through. But the first question I have, and this kind of actually leads me into that, is what drew you to improv specifically? I mean, as an actor, sure, there's a lot of different things you can do as an actor, but improv, like, what drew you to improv, and why did you keep taking improv?
So it was, I was at university training to do film acting, basically. And I There was a module that I could take in my second year, which was improvisation and role play. I thought that sounds interesting. I like improvising. Um, uh, and uh, and they rejected me. They absolutely rejected me. I thought, fuck you, I'm going to do it anyway. And I took an independent study where I could explore the whole world of improvisation, not just this tiny little box of improv. I started with movement improv with Andrew Morris, I Wonder, that sort of improvisation. And I was also doing solo scenes based off of, pretty much based off of Keith Johnstone stuff. And I was
Oh,
exploring improvisation within those realms to begin with. And what I found was that my desire was to get on stage with nothing and succeed. So I was very much high risk, and I was very happy with that world of starting in exploring this world. Um, and as I was doing this, I found a complete attachment to it because it was my whole childhood. I had all these experiences, like the yes and principle. I was using that when I was 13 years old, accidentally. uh, you know uh,
sure.
I was doing solo scenes in my first job in the stockroom. I was doing all these sorts of things. So um improvisation is quite core to who I am as a person before I even started it. So I found it through being rejected, and then I stayed with it because it just connected to who I was.
Great, I love that. I went to this whole thing where there's like this in Hollywood. There's like this saying that you catch the improv bug, and I went as an actor. I was like, I just need to take a class. My manager wants me to take it. I'm just going to take a class, and then people are like, you're going to fall in love with it. You're going to catch the bug. I'm like, nope, not going to happen. And then I've graduated from like almost all the programs that pre-pandemic that Hollywood had to offer. So it's just like I guess I did kind of catch that in a way. So it's great to hear how people decided that improv was kind of something that they clicked with. So I love that. Speaking of things that you click with, is there a specific type of improv that's your favorite? Like, whether it's short form, long form, genre, narrative, whatever it is, and if it's any kind of short form, are there any favorite games that you have that you like to play?
So as I said, I'm high risk, and I'm theatre guy. I'm a theatre guy, really. So my favorite form of it, improv. mm, I don't really necessarily have one. because I want to always be exploring.
Sure.
So I go through all of the things. So at the moment, and for quite some years now, actually, because it's difficult to keep training in the areas I want to. I actually want to train in Buto, which is a Japanese dance form which can be improvised, lovely, wonderful. I want to create a Fool show based off of Jonathan Kay's Fool stuff, which is improvised on stage, and it's wonderful, beautiful as well. I'm a clown, and I teach clown. So I like this. If we wanted to speak in that little box of improv, then it's probably I lean more towards long form. But nowadays the definitions between long form and short form are so contrived. It used to be, I don't know if you know the book by Kozlowski, I think it is. It's talked about Chicago improv. His definition was long form is 15 minutes or more, and you get something and go, pretty much. Let's paraphrase him rather awfully. But you have obviously like the likes of UCB who are doing 10-minute long form sets or 8-minute long form sets. Is that really long form? And also over in the UK, we've got comedy sports players. They are short formers through and through, but they will play a game for 10-15 minutes. So what's really long form, what's really short form? So I don't subscribe to the definition of short form being only games. I subscribe to it by that durational thing, really, because it has long and short in the title.
Sure.
So
it also feels like
it that way.
Yeah, it has to do also kind of like with the style of play too, I think, where you do long form, short form, or again, like you said, there's a lot of times where you do like, let's do a quick long form, or like, let's do a long short form. And it's like, what, like it starts to kind of blur those lines. But that's also what's great about improv is you just never know like what is going to be new that's coming through. Like I'm actually doing right now, as of this recording, a Jane Austen improv class, which is really cool. I don't know, Jane Austen's not my favorite author, but it's been very fun to kind of the person who teaches it is from the UK, so he's teaching us about like the culture and like how these stories, like from like, this is what the storyline is, these are different techniques you can use. So it's fun to see that, and I want to keep exploring that, like whether it's short form or long form. We do short form style exercises, but we also do like long form scenes, but the scenes are like 4 minutes long, so are they really long form? So I get where you're coming from with that. For sure.
The short form is great. I do love short form, but I love short form as a theatre that you do. You're doing it, so create the short form. Like Keith Johnstone created theatre sports, which you improvise within that entertaining structure. It was supposed to be heavily entertaining for the audience, and you improvise within it, and it is short form because you're doing those short little bits within it. And it's wonderful. So create the short form is my thing. I do not like it if it's just a person comes forward and says, we're going to play this game, then you play that game, then they come forward, we're going to play this game, come forward. You can do more than just that. And so I do like short form, but I do push, do more than just say we're going to play a game, then play the game.
Sure.
And my favorite, or one of my favorite short form games is I always try and do games that others don't do. Unfortunately, for the last 15 years, I haven't really seen the games that I kind of push forward as games I haven't seen. It's still the same games. I don't really see others do. So, but I do like Evil Twin as a to answer that specific question of
wow,
what you said earlier.
I don't even know if I've ever even played that game.
That's my point.
Yeah, that's how rare it is. Wow. Great. So on that note, we have Evil Twin, which sounds like a super fun game. But are there any scenes that you've done when you performed in a scene, or any moments when you were teaching a class that are just like ones that you'll like always remember, like those moments that you're like, oh, I loved when this student did this, or I love that one scene that I did this and I'll never forget it, or whatever it is?
I remember, I'll do this one. I remember in a drop-in session in London, which was with Frogspawn. And Frogspawn was a, not a sequel, what word am I looking for? Sequel is a split off. What's the word I'm looking for? Split off from a group, split off from something else. Anyway,
Oh,
it,
yeah, I
it
think
came out of
it sounds right.
it came out of another series of classes, which was the Crunchy Frog Collective, which is their website, but there was a
Like a spin-off,
droppings
kind of.
spin-off. There we go. That'll do.
Sure, why
Thank
not?
you. We got there. So there was a group of people that have this website that were doing actual classes in London, but the spin-off was Frogspawn, Crunchy Frog Collective, Frogspawn. And in any case, it's not really that important to the story at all. But I was in this, and there was a scene that we were doing, and obviously the details of any improvised scene aren't going to be very entertaining if you repeat them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But during this scene, there was a very clear aftermath of we were really in flow, we were really connected, and there was no effort involved in creating this scene, which is what we're always after. And I just remember that moment because that was a clear moment where afterwards I could consciously acknowledge that was definitely a moment of flow, you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
If you let me talk, I would talk forever, because that just
Yeah.
reminds me of talking about. I'm a researcher as well at the moment. I'm doing research in improv and such. So
wow,
that just
great.
made me think of Check My High and all the optimal experience and autotelic activities and such, which I try not to get into.
Sure. I mean, did you want to talk about anything with your research at all, or?
No, I can do, but I'll try and weave it in on a subtle basis.
Sure. Maybe in the next question, maybe we'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
The next question is, what elements of improv have you used in daily life, or what elements of improv do you think are very beneficial for anyone who's like maybe not an actor, or anyone who like me had lacked confidence and wanted to regain that confidence, or is just completely anxious and stressed out all the time? What are some things that you've noticed with improv that can be beneficial for non actors or non performers, or even for actors and performers as well?
So this just set me up very nicely, because my research is looking at the benefits and impact.
Great.
I did a survey, a global survey, not long ago, and I'm still trying to write and publish this, so I can't go into too much on it. But there are there are potential benefits that are in the literature, and I'll talk about that instead. And my survey kind of just speaks about the past literature based on the survey itself. If we look at academic literature and the publications that are in the peer-reviewed journals, we can find out that there's supposed to be this this added value to people's lives, this positivity, which can be experienced. And you were talking about how you were talking about how it's supposed to entice you to keep going, and it's supposed to have something for you that keeps you there, builds your confidence, for example, as you're saying. So that is most likely going to be true. And obviously, we talk about getting on stage, being spontaneous with other people, and building scenes together, which is about communication. So we're going to have these social communication skills that we're going to develop through it as well. And what was I going to say now? And I'll come back to the other thought I had then. And the other things we can look at is a sense of community, because we have not met in person, but yet we're doing this together. We're part of the same community. So that could also be in existence, right? It could be a global community. Even if you're in a small village community, perhaps you're still going to have some benefits of being in that group. To make it into an anecdote, I remember going to London, because before the pandemic I did do that. It doesn't matter where I lived. I've lived all over the place.
I feel like most people traveled before the pandemic.
Yes. And I remember going to the Nursery Theater, and that's an improv institute, I guess, of a school and an actual theater as well that exists. And they've had lots of different buildings and such. One of them was an arch in London, which was not a little at all, it's massive, but an archway, which is under a railway line. And I remember going into there after a day of class from guests from UCB that came down. I didn't book onto the class. I was doing something else. Well, I remember I thought, well, look at the time. I know when the class is going to finish. I'm going to go to the theatre.
Mm-hmm.
As I sneak in, and they're just winding up taking photos from the class. Must have been a Sunday, and did the whole weekend of class.
Mm.
And a whole load of people shout my name. You know, it's a cheers moment where everyone knows your name. You know, and it's great because that is it, right?
Sure.
You're belonging to a community because people know who you are, etc. And it feels great to have that. So that's definitely going to be a benefit as well. And it could potentially be relaxing, and potentially there could be some elements of mindfulness. But mindfulness probably depends where you're coming from as well. Like most of these things, actually, it depends what you wanted it for in some regards, which at the moment I'm doing some studies as well, which probably looking at that kind of variance of what you can gain and the benefits that could be there depending on who you are in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah. So these are the areas that I looked at for that survey, essentially.
Great. I love that. I think that what I don't think people realize is when they watch improv, if they're not in the improv community, they're like, "Oh, I'm not funny. I can't do this." And it's like that's not the point of improv. It's not to be funny. I mean, sure, it would be great to be funny, but it's not the point of improv. It's not to be funny. The point of improv is to support each other because everyone's always on a team. You know, whether it's you doing a solo thing with an audience member or a two-prov team or whatever. I think that's what people don't realize is a big benefit. Is like you said, with the improv community being worldwide. I actually know some of the UK comedy sports players when they came to national championships in LA, and so it's like I would have never met them otherwise, but like, the improv community, it's like when people are always going over and it's like, oh, improv this, and posting in different improv Facebook groups, getting different people from all over the world to kind of do this improv summit to see where things are different, but everything seems to be the same with everyone feeling like it's a welcoming space and that it is a community, and it's not necessarily about being funny or being this or being that. It's about enjoying the experience you have with others. So I think that that's really great. And on that note, I'm actually doing very well leading into my questions, which is surprising because I'm just like, and on another question. But that being said, what do you feel makes a good improviser? And it's a loose term because it's different for everyone. But for you, what feels like it's not like a checklist. Like if you have this, this, and this, you're a good improviser. But what to you makes a good improviser?
Well, I'll go back to my research actually, because the survey was pretty much asked that same question. And at the moment, study I'm doing is literally asking that same question. So I'm going to have to try and avoid saying what other people have told me.
Sure.
So what makes a good improviser? You said the word support a moment ago, and that is the crux of it to some extent. You're there not for yourself. You're there to be supporting of others, and it's not about being funny. Susan Messing says, "Get rid of that NY and just have the fun." Right? And the way I express that is we're there to share the fun with the audience, with each other. It's supposed to be a moment for everyone. We were talking about community earlier. Trester 2012 was talking about the community being the audience as well, because you're involving them in what that moment is. They are a part of it, even if they're not given a suggestion. They're still a part of it. They're there. They're participating by offering themselves and that atmosphere, that energy, whatever you wish to say. They are part of that community for that moment, at least. And once you leave an improv show, no one else will see that ever again. So you have that connection with those performers, even if they don't recognize you because you were in the audience under no lighting. You kind of have that in-joke that's there available, even if it's not literally there. You have that social bond to some extent. So I sidetracked myself there from the
No, it's all
question, I
good.
think,
I
but
love it. Keep
but
talking.
it's relevant, or at least it was. So yeah, you have to be supporting, and you have to be there for others. It's been other focused. Yeah, in class I say it slightly more rudely than that, but
Well,
it's that's key. So yeah,
yeah,
it's about that. It's about working well to get to with one another. There's a book which is quite a literal title of that, playing well with others. Was it? Yes, it's playing well with others. Is the book
mm,
title. I forget the author, unfortunately. I'm sorry. Um, uh, uh, yeah, but there is a multitude of answers to this. So I think I'm timing how much I speak and the breath that comes out of my mouth,
well,
and
it's all
that's
good.
phrasing like maybe I should stop because I've spoken for a long enough time now. Because there is so much of an answer that's possible answers to this question.
Sure.
Maybe I'll just pinpoint it with one answer for now, with the little tail off as a little bonus.
Sure. I was gonna say this answer, I feel like this question could be like a 30-minute conversation all on its own. Like really, it's like it's kind of like doing like the Spark Notes version, but it really could be like a full-on conversation. And what is also interesting, and I want to point this out for whoever is watching or listening to this, every single person I've had on here has used the word support or team or anything like that. And it's like, sure, people who understand improv is great, but what seems to be a big factor is if you can play well with others. And I think that that's something that I want people to understand. It's a team sport. It's not about like you being funny, you as an individual, which for me, if I'm feeling like I have that pressure, it's too much for me. I'd rather be like, I got 7 other people, I got 5 other people to like hang out with, and I can let them lead, I can support, they can support, and it actually is a lot less stressful to me to know that I have other people that I'm able to support, so it's not all the pressure on me. But I think people sometimes don't realize that improv is not about you, and that's like a one person you, like not, it's about the you collective, not the you individual. So I think that that's what's I think is
I'll add to that, because what is
sure.
fascinating is going back to what you said near the start, is about how you built confidence. That is about you, but you have to go external before you can even come back to yourself in the first place. So if you wanted to do a solo show, that could be perceived as being quite difficult. But if you support yourself, if you build that self-confidence, if you can trust yourself, accept yourself, and all those sorts of things, to be able to do that in the first place, then maybe we are talking about personal growth and personal development within those things. And you can find these things within improv for sure.
Mhm.
I can't suggest that directly come from any research, but it's come from my practitioner experience.
There you go. Yeah, I think it is one of those things where I have noticed when I've noticed when I get more confident, but I've also noticed those aha moments for me. Like I was talking about this one time where I was in a class and it was like the last level of the program. It was a 6 level program. There was one day, Holly Laurent in iOS, which if you're watching, you've probably already heard me say this, but I'm going to say it again. But this was the performance levels, the last level of the whole program, and she said, think about it like this, just as a general note to the class. She said, think about it like this. When you're, think of it as like a basketball court. When you're on the sidelines, you're, playing on the field, or on the field, when you're playing on the court. And then when you're in the two-person scene or you're in the scene, you're on the bench. And the second she said that, I went, wait a second. Being in the scene is less stressful than being on the sidelines. It literally flipped my mind to being like, it's actually easier to be on stage doing the scene than it is to be waiting to go into the scene. And it completely changed. That's probably not the best way to phrase it, but it completely changed my mind of being like, oh, I feel safe on the sidelines. I feel safe here. I feel safe here. It was like, oh, being in the scene is the hardest part for me, is just getting into a scene. And once I did that, once she said that, I was like, oh, this is where I want to be, because it's less stressful. In the scene. But I
Yeah,
also,
that makes sense. That does make sense if you
yeah,
think about it. If you're
yeah,
doing premise-based improv, then when you're on the side, you have to be paying attention to what's going on stage, but you also have to remember what your premises were. If you got a bunch, if you haven't got a bunch, you're probably going to try and come up with them whilst they're still performing, and then you have to think, well, what do they need? What do I need to do to support them? When am I going to edit?
hmm,
Obviously, this isn't about thinking at all. It's about being present to all of that at the same time without anything
right,
being over cumbersome. That's the word I'm looking for.
yeah.
So yes, it's going to be more difficult when you're not in the scene, because when you're in the
Uh-huh.
scene, all you're doing is flowing.
Yeah, and it was wild because like I'm very much like I feel like a left brain. Like I'm very good with like time structure, organization, kind of things like that. So giving me a form, I'm like, okay, I know exactly what's next. And I'm sitting here watching these scenes, and I can do like, I could pull a second beat, I could pull a third beat. When you're talking Herald specific, I can start a group game. Like I can pull the button at the end. I can find those tags. I can find those edits. I know where those all fit. And I'm like, ooh, I'm cooking these ideas of like, I could do this. I could do this. And I get so into that, or at least I was before that moment clicked, where I was so into that I would just never go out and do anything. And people are like, you got to get out. I'm like, just pull me out. If you pull me out, I will do it. I'm so focused on all of the side support that I'm not thinking about the fact that, oh, I haven't even gone out yet. Let me jump in and do a 2-person scene. Like, let me be the first beat or the second beat or the third beat. I'm always thinking, how can I support? How can I do this? How can I pull this beat? How can I pull this tag? That I was like, just pull me. So people would start pulling me out. And then eventually I got out of that whole like left brain mode and started to be like, oh yeah, I can do all of the things. So I think that it is one thing, at least for me, that's another thing that improv helped me, is it helped me balance my left and my right brain when I'm performing, because it does involve both. But naturally I'm more left brain than right brain in the world of improv. And so I was able to balance. I keep doing this with my hands, like this is, I have such a big brain that it's like way away from my head. But I'm also terrible at object work. I've discovered that too. But the right side of my brain started to mold with my left, and so then they became kind of like its own mind meld of like, oh yeah, I do need to be in a scene and come up with this like scene as I'm doing it, but I also need to remember when to edit. I need to remember what the scenes were so I can go back and do those second beats and those third beats. So, but that's one thing that I love about improv, is
Mm.
you just never know, and it's just so fun to constantly explore and change it up and just like be like, oh, those moments of clicking is what really I've noticed that I love that so much. And I teach kids improv, and when they click, I'm like, oh yes, you got it.
Yeah,
It's a great
nice,
feeling.
nice. Do you know?
um
Do you know that story with well, not necessarily. It's not necessarily going to be a story, but Patrick Stewart did the Empire Shakespeare Company multiple
mhm,
times now. The first time he went, I remember reading or hearing about what he thought or learnt. I think it's what he thought when starting it. Um, but he basically just said, the best way for me to do this is to just go into the first scene and it'll be
mhm,
fine. And the other thing I think I remember now is when they were talking about how it generally works, him being the professional actor of many years now, or back then at least, well, as well as now, uh, he just goes, yes, it's all about listening. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is. It's just
mhm,
awareness, just all sorts of listening observations. Yes. But yeah, it just reminded what you I was saying, reminded me of you saying going in quickly.
mhm,
Just reminds me of him saying the same thing. Just go in,
mhm,
be the first in, and it'll all be
mhm.
fine.
Well,
It will
even
be
then, when you talk about listening in improv, it's such a skill that I feel like a lot of people think that they're good listeners, and then they get to improv and they're like, wait, what did you just say? But two, here's the idea that I want, that I had in my head. I wasn't really listening to what you were saying, that I'm going to just say my thing. But one thing I learned, like I just took a improvised Shakespeare intro class.
fine.
Shout out Impro Theater in LA. And I I mean, I learned how to listen in improv because I've been doing it for a little while, but that class really taught me to listen, because it's dialect that I'm not used to hearing. And so people are saying words, and I'm like, I have to listen to every single thing that comes out of your mouth, or I'm not going to know what you said. Because it's words that you don't hear very often nowadays because it's kind of been taken out of the dialect. It's not modern. So that class was so great for that, because it's like I'm in this scene with two other characters. I got to figure out who these characters are, but also what they're saying, what this scene's about, because it's not dialect I'm used to hearing. So I think that the idea of listening, it's like there's this idea of like almost in a sense a heightened listening. Like I'm always listening to what people are saying, but whether or not I'm processing it or understanding everything they're saying is different. But with something like improv, I've learned if someone else is talking, the only thing I have to do is listen to what they're saying. I don't have to like be planning an idea because I don't know what they're going to say. I don't have to be doing something. I don't have to be funny. I just have to listen. Like if I'm saying something, okay, I said my thing. Now I'm listening to what this other person's saying. That's all I have to do is focus my attention to what the one person's saying. And I think that that's what I love about improv is, you think you're a good listener, and then you do improv and you're like, wow, I thought I was a good listener. And then you start to build that, because it's a whole different like listening skill. Like there's, listening, and then there's listening. And I think that like improv has it's a whole different skill of listening. It's not just like, listening to music or listening to this. It's listening in improv, which is a whole different listening skill, I think, which I think is really cool. Which also leads me into not quite as well, but into I would guess I guess my my next question before my last question. My next question is as a teacher and as a performer, a lot of people want to know, like, let's say, like, because some people are terrified of doing improv because they see other people that are so much better than them, or they feel like they're better than them. What is some advice that you would give to both a person who's maybe never gone to an improv show, maybe never done a class, and this is their first time on stage, let's say in a jam, and they're with someone who's been improvising for 10 or 15 years, who's a really good improviser, picks up on everything really quickly, but you put them both in a scene. How do you, or like, what kind of advice would you give to both of those players to allow each of them to shine in that scene where they both feel like they're being supported, if that makes sense?
Yes, I think there's lots and lots of different answers here.
Sure. And
So
this is another one of those
I'll try
30-minute
and break it down.
conversations.
I'll try and break it down. So if you've got someone who's not necessarily taking a class in a jam, which jams themselves, if they're set up well, can be a good training ground, full stop. But if they're set up to be a bit of just an opportunity for people that have taken a bunch of classes to try and have 30 seconds on stage, which it can often be, then that's not going to be a good training ground at all. But if you have someone with like 10 years experience and someone with no classes or one class, then it's going to be easy, should be, in the sense that the person with experience knows how to treat you. They're going to be so supportive of everything you do, so accepting of everything you do, so non-judgmental about everything you do, that it should be really easy. Something else you said earlier was that you could do a set with someone from the audience, and there's a bunch of people around the world that do that. I've done it as well. It's great fun. What I tended to want when I did do it was that it's with someone who has literally no experience, because all they're going to do is everything right. You can't go wrong, but they don't have anything to work off of. They're just going to be their natural self. They're just going to do everything that they need to do in the first place, and it's your job to guide it forward. It's your job to be in reaction to them in a way that's going to provide the scene. It's structured in a way. Yeah. I did a free-form cross art show in Bristol, which was an hour long, and it was wonderful. We had circus, dance, narrative, songs, whatever art form you could think of. Well, we wanted there. We even eventually was starting to put art installation into the show itself, which is when it started to change a little bit of what it was, it was good, it was fine. But my point here is, for me, my role in that, I felt in the end, was to be more of that structural person. That's just my perception, of course. It wasn't.
Sure.
That's not literally what what my role was, but my perception is that. So when it felt like we're coming up to an hour, because I don't agree with using clocks. You train to know how long your set is.
Uh-huh.
So we always practiced an hour long. So we close it around the hour mark, and we never use the clock.
Mm.
So for me, I was kind of the structural thing of how did we start, what themes and what content have we had in this hour, and let's try and bring some of that back so we have a whole production. So structuring. So with some experience, that might be what you have in that scene, in that jam. For me, that's what it felt like in this show I had, and it was great fun. I enjoyed adopting that role. Saying about the clock thing, the only time it was ruined was after a festival where we did various renditions of this show, and none of them lasted an hour because they didn't have to last an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So we came back to the rehearsal and I stop it. It's 45 minutes. No! Got trained out of the hour.
Yeah. Which is also another skill on its own, is being able to identify when you got to hit that last beat before the lights go out.
I've also experienced a lot of theatres, or I have experienced a lot of theatres that want you to call the end of your show. Well, if we're improvising together, you're on tech.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a clock there anyway. You can pull the lights at the appropriate moment. You can edit us on the last thing that you want us to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It should be improvised together, even if you aren't in the team, in the company. You are part of this team, part of this company, because you're part of the show. You've got the lights, you've got the sound. You can participate and improvise with us. I have experienced people not doing that though. They want you to just call it. Well, if I go, see, and that's our show. Does that look as professional as a professional theatre piece or production?
Right.
If I'm doing that, or is it better to have the lights go out?
It's much better to have the lights, because I feel like it gives you, I mean, and of course that's how it is, depending on the theater, but I think that it feels like it's almost come full circle. Like if it's a finish, as opposed to like, that's my time. Like with comedians, it's like end with a nice like thing, versus like, okay, that's it. The lights are coming down now. But I remember when I had to do that for our class shows, they wouldn't have a coach or teacher there like on Saturday nights at 8 or whatever. So we had to do it ourselves. What we did was we said, okay, we're gonna pull the lights up. We're just gonna have the lights up. We're gonna do the whole scene. And when we get to like that 25-minute mark or whatever, someone just go run down to the lights, go look for a blackout, and then blackout and call it. And I think that worked out really well, because it wasn't someone sitting, at least someone on the team, being like, well, I'll be tech tonight, I guess, and just sit there and do whatever. And, we did the sweep edit, so it made it easier to, we didn't have to do all the lights all the time. But yeah, but again, support. It feels like with bringing it back to the whole new improviser and expert improviser, the new one wants to feel supported, and the expert knows how to support. So it helps balance out that idea of support, because it's a team. It's not about, oh, I'm better than you, or oh, I'm not as good as you. And that's something I've learned, is like, I improvise with people who I'm like, why are they so much like, why do I feel like I'm not that good at improv? And then I take a second and I'm like, oh, they've been doing it 10 years longer than I have. They've been doing it 15 years longer than I have, even a year longer than I have. So I'm like, oh, in a year, I want to achieve the level that they're at in a year, or in 10 years, or in 15 years, which is doable. And I have to, it's always like this, like, it's always, it's a journey. It's not like I can't just like wake up overnight, wake up the next day and be like, well, now I'm an expert improviser, because that's not how it works. But it's like seeing people, I'm like, I want to play with people that I know are better than me, because it's going to help me get better. And I want to play with people who are just starting out, because I can make them look good. And it also allows me to take a step back and be like, what does yes and mean? And I'm not like doing all these like crazy ideas, but it's like someone who gives me an offer and it's like, that's a beautiful offer. And I literally know how to respond to that, because it's so like improv 101, and it helps to sometimes go back and think of those basics. So I think the support is great. So leading into my
I think
last Oh,
I
go
think
ahead.
I probably should go on the other side, at least try and
Yeah,
give you two answers to this question, because
sure.
otherwise I'm missing something. If uh, the if the person with less experience doesn't feel like they've been glowing on the stage in this scene, then that means the expert, whatever that really means, improviser, has failed. You know,
Right.
it's that classic. I think it was TJ, who won the Improv Award in Chicago, whenever that was. And I think his speech was something along the lines of, "This just shows how much I shouldn't be winning this award, because I clearly have failed." Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because Dow Close's thing of treating everyone like poets, artists, and geniuses, right? The idea here is not to be the one that's showboating, not the one to have the
Sure.
spotlight or have that looking better than the other person. So they clearly failed. So the advice there to the one with no experience is that if that is happening, then that wasn't your fault for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It should definitely be that they're giving you the chance and highlighting everything you do as being wonderful, and um, so that's good. And the actual advice would be, because that's not really practical, the actual advice if you're entering a jam with someone with more experience, or just in general really, is relax. Another Susan Messing quote: relax your crack. um, because if you're not relaxed, then it's not going to go well, really.
Mm-hmm.
You need to relax, you need to trust it's all going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
um, there is actually, when I get it published, you can read something about those two words actually. um, yeah, yeah, I think that's enough for that one.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
No, it's
jam
all
it in there
good.
quickly.
I feel like now I'm looking at a lot of these questions, feel like they could be like their own conversation on their own. Which, speaking of their own conversation, uh, this is my last question, and it's basically the reason, not basically, it's the reason I'm doing the summit is because I have a lot of people in my circle who, especially pre-pandemic, but even now with all these options to take improv all over the world because it's all online, more accessible to anyone from anywhere, people always say, Spencer, you do a lot of improv. Where should I take improv? And it always becomes a loaded question because there's so much to dig into that question. So my question for you is, if someone approached you and said, "Where should I take improv?" What is something? Because obviously this is another whole like 30-minute conversation on its own too. But what is something that you would offer them? Like, what's some kind of tip or advice that you'd offer them when they ask that question?
So going back to what I said at the start, is that as a theatre guy, I'm still exploring all these different improvisational art forms. So my tip would be to know exactly what you're looking for, to know exactly what you want. Um, so you could go into commedia dell'arte, you could go into playback theatre, you could go into Buto, you could go into the solo text with movement with Andrew Morris sort of stuff, or theatre ordinary, our wonder action theatre, Ruth Stapperer. You could go into all these different forms, all improv, all improvised. All of them can be comedic. Some of the last ones were all dance, by all means, but they can still be comedic. If you want funny, if you want laughs, you can get it by dancing as well, not an issue. You could do clown, but even then, clown, what sort of clown do you want to do? Uh, then you
Mm-hmm.
have to make those choices. So it is about exploring what it is you really want. Do you want to do linear narrative long form? Do you want to do non-linear long form? Do you want to do the quick fire short form games? Do you want to do non-quick fire short form
Mm-hmm.
games? It depends what you want to do, essentially. I do advocate clown training. I do advocate using formats to learn. So I do suggest that even those that hate the Herald is a great platform to learn with. If you're not going to perform it a bunch, train with it a bunch, because it is going to help your development. Um, and then every teacher will have a different look, and there's lots of different styles. I was just talking about art forms, now I've got to talk about styles, different styles. Obviously I started actually kind of talking about styles, because where does the linear and non-linear stuff fall into that?
Mm-hmm.
They're not art forms of their own right necessarily, or are they? um anyway, like the styles used to be that specific style of gamer scene is very different to how I would teach gamer scene, for example. And then even talking about gamer scene is very different style to Impro, where you're looking at storytelling theatre. Obviously, Dow Close and Keith Johnstone met, conversed, and such, and they came from different places within the arts, so that created a different way of improvising from those two big names. So these are different styles that you can perform within as well. So I think that's a lot to think about, really, when you talk about it. However, in reality, we live in a world where some people won't have a lot of access to improv classes. Some people might have nothing. They might just have spots of people that are interested, or maybe they're in a local community, not an improv community, where there's lots of different opportunities to do stuff. And there's going to be a lack of commitment to improv specifically, because they've got lots of other things they like doing. So they might love improv, but they might not necessarily commit to it. So that means they don't have an opportunity to do it. I think that's important to say, because there's lots of people out there that would love to do more improv, but they can't. So I trained with IO. I had Holly as well. I think she actually took over from Kate Kakowski when I was over in IO West. So iOS was a joy. I loved the training there. It was really useful, really lovely. So I advocate that, but obviously not going to happen anymore. Where's it gone? Yes, it's all closed down. They're all closing down. That's not exactly the greatest topic for many improvisers in the world.
But even on that
let's
note,
zip it on IO.
I was going to say, even on that note, though, the beauty is having taken these classes at IO West. IO West is a form, it's a style, it's a style of play for improv. But these teachers these teachers and these coaches, they learn how to teach that improv specific group, but they're also great teachers, and they're incredible teachers that have gone on to other places that are still around. And so I think that that's another thing that's really great about improv is, especially improv players, improv teachers, improv students generally tend to be people who can morph and adapt really quickly because they have that improv knowledge. And so I think it's like, Holly is teaching other classes elsewhere. She's brilliant. She's a great performer. And so I think it's like, even though it's like, I miss iOS so much. It was the first place I took improv. It's where I felt like improv was for me. I love it so much. Those teachers are elsewhere. So if you find those teachers that you like, you can always, I don't want to say follow because that sounds weird, but you can literally follow them from school to school and learn the philosophies of these schools, but take what teachers that you really like, but also take with teachers you've never taken with before to experience new ways of doing improv and learning improv. Because I've had teachers where they say stuff and I'm like, I can't quite click with what you're saying. And then someone else will say something. And in one sentence, I'm like, I totally understand this now. This whole 8 weeks, I finally figured out because the sub said something that made sense to me. And that's what I've learned is people all learn in different ways. And so if you have like this specific style of play, I understand that from my left brain side, but my right brain is like, I don't know what you're saying. I can't quite figure this out. I think I understand, but then someone else turns around and says it. And I'm like, oh, that analogy worked better for me than the anecdote or whatever it is. And I think that's something to think about too, is if you're not quite figuring it out you're like, oh, this isn't for me, I can't figure it out after one class. I would say specifically don't give up, because it could be the teacher, it could be the style of play. There are certain schools that I've gone through the program and I'm like, I did the program because I wanted to finish it, but it's not the type of improv for me, or it's not the type of whatever for me. And I picked up on that really quickly on a lot of different, especially with the bigger schools. And I was like, I felt like between picking ones, I was like, let me try IO first. And I felt like IO was really like the one that I grasped. I don't know how, yeah, grasped. I grasped onto that one the most, and like really was like, this makes sense to me. And then I went to like another school, and the way they taught stuff, I was like, oh, I don't feel like a good improviser, but it's because the philosophies are so different that I clicked with that IO philosophy more than say some of the others. And I think and there are certain things that I loved about certain places and certain things where I was like, this is not, my brain doesn't understand it in this way, but it understands it in this way. And I think that that's what's great about improv is there are so many different ways to teach it and to learn it that you got to find the way that works for you.
And something to add to your list is also time. It might just not be the right time for you to understand that point. It might need improv is a journey. Like improv is a journey of your arts. It's also a journey of your life in some regard, I suppose. We want to try and connect it to that applied way. But time is really important because you might be reminded of something someone said 5-10 years ago, and then it suddenly clicks because it's just the right time. You didn't need it back then. It wasn't the right time. It's because there's lots and lots you can pick up in a lesson, and as a teacher, you got to acknowledge that. You got to acknowledge what people are getting rather than what you want them to get as well. So teaching is opportunistic. It's Keith Sawyer talks about the improvisational teacher, and he started researching improv in Chicago back in the 80s. He had VHS tapes where he was watching, doing discourse analysis of it, of all these performances. Oh, that sounds painstaking, because it's literally noting everything, not just the words, every intonation, every movement, all sorts of that stuff, sort of stuff. Oh, sounds not quite the analysis I would want to use, but he's been studying improv since back then, and he talks about the improvisational teacher, and there's lots of elements to this, but I guess my point is the fact that it's just teaching is also about improvising with the students there. So you need to acknowledge where people are and what they can take, what they want to take. And knowing that as a learner, you also got to think the same. You also got to acknowledge why you're in the room, what you're there for, what you want to take. Are you open to the ideas this person's given you? If it's not your sort of style, then you just need to acknowledge that as well. Yeah, but then you might become neurotic. So there's pinch of salt, try and find a balance.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, we've talked a lot about improv. You want to do some improv?
Sure. We are improvising for camera, so let's make sure we acknowledge that as well, and I'll make sure I'm available to do so.
Great. I'm gonna keep sitting because I don't have much to work with, but move around you can. So I have this wonderful website called canigeta.com. It's not my website. I keep saying I found a wonderful website, and I'll keep linking it. But it offers a location, a relationship, or a word. So which one would you like?
Well, I literally cannot do the location. So if you say church, I can't provide a church here, nor a background of a church. So we'll use one of the other ones. Maybe a word's the easiest to work with.
Sure.
So we can
so
just allow that to turn up in the scene.
Sure. So we'll do a word. We'll just do like a couple minutes or so, nothing too crazy.
Okay.
And the word is hat.
Hat.
H-A-T, hat.
Yeah, let me just put that there. Yeah. You're staring at me.
Sorry, you looked like you had something you wanted to say.
Well, I did. I did want to say something, but then you started just looking at me in a peculiar way. So I stopped
I'm sorry.
Don't kill me.
Oh no, absolutely not. I just wanted to see if there was anything I could help you with, or if you wanted to ask me a question. Sorry, I was trying to be helpful.
It's just that someone came by and kicked me yesterday, and I don't know why. And then you don't kick me.
Oh no,
Don't kill me. Don't kick me. Just you a scary one. You a scary one.
I'm sorry. What if I avert my eyes? Maybe if I just don't look at you, maybe that'll help calm your nerves. I promise I wouldn't hurt a fly.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anything you need my help with, or is there anything you wanted to say? I just wanted to be here to listen.
I lost my little Rachel. She disappeared 2 days ago.
Oh,
I've been asking about, but I keep getting abuse.
that's
They
terrible.
abuse me.
I'm sorry to hear that. You're already so upset and depressed. I don't know anyone would make it worse for you. Do you mind if I take a look at you?
Okay. Just
I'm gonna do
one
it.
quick look. One quick look. Just
Um,
a quick one.
yes. Okay, I'm gonna go back.
Thank you. That's enough. Yeah. Have you seen Rachel?
I haven't seen Rachel. I mean, she's all over the news.
Yeah.
Um, I know they're looking really hard for her.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help?
Give me back my Rachel.
I
Was it you? Was it you? Come on, one quick look. One quick look. I want to see your eyes.
I'm turning now.
Okay. Was it you? I see it in your eyes. I see it in your eyes.
Um, I know where Rachel is. I can take you to her.
Go on. Go on. Go on. You're gonna tell me. You're gonna tell me you killed
Yes.
her, didn't you? You're
Oh
gonna tell me.
no, I didn't. I know where she is.
You know
She's
what?
safe.
Is that why you came? You're taunting me. You didn't want to kick me. You didn't want to kill me. You're just taunting me. Where is she? You keep telling me you're gonna show me, but you're not showing
Yes.
me.
Okay. All
Where
right.
is she?
Yes. Yes. I wanted to try and make amends. Um,
Amends.
she's
It's 2 days, and you're just standing there saying, "What do you want? What do you want? I know where she is. I know
she's
where
at
she is."
yes. She's at the corner of Ninth and uh Crabtree Lane.
I think Crabtree Lane. That's where the butcher is. You gave her to the butchers.
Uh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should have one more quick look. Look at me now. Look at me now. Those lying eyes. Those taunting eyes. I read you. I read you.
If you go now, I think everything will be okay.
Honestly, honestly.
Honestly,
Okay. I need money for the bus fare.
it's the least I can do.
Thank you. Thank you. No, I raped you. I'm coming for you. You bastard. I'm coming for you, Rachel.
Well, I hope your reunion is grand.
Why take my Rachel? I hope it's grand. But when I get her, you better watch out.
Scene. Do you have anything you want to pitch or plug? And I'll put it in the. This is my really bad object work I keep doing. I'll type it in the chat. Told you I'm not good at object work. I've done that in every one. I'm like, I'll type it in the chat, and who does a computer like this? I don't know, but okay. But I'll type it in the chat of the YouTube.
Yeah, so you can follow me on social media. That's Nathan Improv, Twitter and Facebook, Instagram, Nathan Improv 1, because some bastard took it. Don't know why. I don't think they do any improv, looking at what their profile is. Yeah, I teach all around the UK when I can. So I got Cardiff Impro, Canterbury Improv, Basingstoke Improv. I used to tour around the world eventually. That might change with pandemic plus Brexit. So I can teach classes. I am teaching online. As I say, I do promote ever online improvising for being online. So play around with all of that element and things as well is really useful. So I embed that in my teaching now. So I'm teaching film acting and improvising for camera in that as well. It's a weekly drop-in, Fridays, 7 p.m. UK time, GMT.
So it's probably about 11 a.m. Pacific, I think, is what it seems to be about. Because it's like 9 o'clock for you right now, right? About 9 o'clock?
Yeah, coming up to that, yeah.
Yeah, so we're 1 o'clock, so 8 hours difference. So
There you
whatever his time is, it's 8 hours earlier in Pacific time.
There you go, thank you. Anything else to plug? No, but if you're in a university, I wrote a book specifically for university students to teach improv. And in the book, I do promote exploring different improvisational art forms. So I have a session on fools, a session on clown, in the book. So get my book. It's titled what it is. It's University Improv Comedy Society Manual. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it is literally what it is. It's for university students and it's for their societies, and it's improv comedy and it's a manual. It's sessions. It's literally how you teach it.
That's awesome. I'll have to check it out. I've been trying
Amazon.
to find some improv books. There are some that are great and some that are a little heady. This one sounds a little less heady. It sounds a little more digestible.
It's literally sessions, so it's literally just how you teach it.
Great. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Nathan. That's Nathan. I'm Spencer, and this is the Improv Summit. Have a great day.